So you got an old path, it's not doing the job, it's not wide enough, it's sunk into the ground, so the grass is growing over the edge, and you think about reusing that material for a new path. People call it Urbanite, just a busted up concrete path. First thing you got to do though is plan it out, draw it out, measure it out. Once you've done that, I marked where my path is going to be going using some spray paint. If you want straighter lines, you could use stakes and then run string in between them. Once everything's marked, now you got to dig out the path. In my case, I had to remove the concrete that was already there, but then I also wanted to widen the path. Found that the edging spade was the best tool for doing this. Now in a perfect world, you're going to go down about 8-9 inches and remove all of that soil, and at the bottom of that 8-9 inches you'd put 3-4 inches of crushed rock, and then you'd put a couple inches of leveling sand, and then only then would you be laying down your concrete, which I'm assuming would be approximately 3 to 4 inches thick. Now I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't do that. I did not lay down the crushed rock. I already have extremely sandy soil. I go down about 5-6 inches and then it's just pure sand below that. Also, I was replacing an existing path, so a good portion of that already had sand from the previous path there. So my goal was to go down about 4 or 5 inches and then have a base of about 1 inch sand. So now I've got my path dug. I've gone back and I've filled it with sand. I rake it out, try and get it even. Initially I was trying really hard to get the sand perfectly level and all of that. But what I found was that there was so much variation in the thickness of the concrete that I was using that it was just a big waste of time. So I put the sand down, I rake, get it as level as I can get it, but not spend way too much time worrying about it. Now, if you haven't already, you've got to go and get the material that you're going to use to pave your path. In my case, the sidewalk was missing pieces when I bought the house, and so I used some flagstone that I found and filled in the missing gaps. So I dug that up to be reused. But the most interesting part is when I've gone on the internet and read the websites on doing this, no one actually showed the busting up or that I found of the concrete to turn into Urbanite. I had all sorts of illusions that I was going to get really fancy with the busting up of my concrete and get really tight-fitting pieces, but what I found very quickly is that this is heavy, hard work, and really what I ended up just doing was loosening the concrete that was there with the shovel, giving it a whack with my maul, and then moving on, and then trying to fit the pieces the best I could later on. And there's a really good picture of like the inconsistency of thickness that I was talking about in the concrete. You can see that when they poured it, they must have had all these rocks that they laid down, and then they poured the concrete over that. Another thing is I realized that if I busted it up and I could move it, then I didn't want to make it any smaller than it was. Because the bigger it is, the less likely it's going to be to move later on or shift or whatever. So I really tried to keep pieces to be bigger than maybe 1 or 2 square feet. Any smaller, yeah, I used them to fill the gaps, but I really tried to keep those larger pieces. Again, so I'd use the shovel to loosen up the concrete from the ground. Maybe I would stick a rock underneath it to give it a little bit of a gap in between the ground and the bottom of the concrete, and then I would just crack it right down the middle, trying to create 3-4 large pieces to work with later on. Alright, so now you think we've done all the hard work, we've done all the digging, we've broken up all the concrete and all that. Now is when we get to be artistic and all of that, but let me tell you, this was no easy stage in the project. Fortunately, I was going for a more organic look, so lines didn't have to be straight, but you'd have to go and find perfect pieces to fit together like a puzzle. Sometimes the concrete would be a little thick, so I'd have to wiggle it back and forth or remove a little bit of the sand underneath it. Sometimes the concrete wouldn't be thick enough and I'd have to put more sand in a particular spot just because there was so much variation in the thickness of the concrete, and I would spend a lot of time wiggling it back and forth, stepping on it, pounding on it, trying to get it all level so that no edges would be poking up and grab your shoes when you're walking on it. When I would get pieces kind of where I'd want them, I wouldn't completely fill the gaps with sand, but I would use some of my leveling sand to kind of lock them into place. Not trying to scare people off from this project, but maybe you're getting an idea of the amount of effort and time that it takes to put this all together. Now, depending on the look you're going for, maybe you want to put actual soil in between the Urbanite pavers. Then you could grow grass or creeping thyme or something like that. I chose to fill the gaps with river rock, the really large gaps, and then go back over that with paver locking sand or polymeric sand or whatever it's called. The instructions for the paver locking sand that I got from Menards was to sweep it into the cracks, and then I needed to sprinkle water on it 3 times, separated by about 10 minutes, so that the water could seep into the sand and then lock into position. Now, you may have noticed that the seasons have been changing throughout this video. I started last fall, put in about 2-3 Saturdays, got about halfway done. Then the ground froze, we got snow, and then I had to wait till spring to finish, wait for the ground to thaw out, and I probably put in another 4 or 5 weekends to be able to finish up the overall project. So here's the final product. The path runs all the way from the front yard to the backyard. Right now I'm walking from the backyard and heading towards the front yard. It's actually turned out probably better than I should have hoped. It has a nice organic feel. It's not perfect. There are some spots where it's not completely level, but it fits well with my yard.